So, hi, I'm Brendan Falkowski. You can find me on Twitter at Falkowski. I'm a designer and front-end developer, and I run a consulting business called Gravity Department since around 2009. My work's split kind of 50-50 between consulting and product dev. And companies usually hire me to steer their front-end strategy. So it's my job to understand their products and their customers, help them set priorities, and then execute both the design and the technical implementation for multi-device world that we live in. On the side, I make some products. One's called Acumen. It's a theme that I've maintained for about 6 years. And I finally have version 2 coming out in a couple weeks, so Yahoo for that. And I'm building a tool called Mage Frontend. Right now it's for Magento 2. It's a design system to help implement and maintain really complex sites. One ahead. So I'm also a member of Magento's advisory board for developer certification, and I'm a certified front-end developer, so I help devs get smarter. And this is my 6th Imagine and 5th year speaking, so I'm really excited to be back, and I get to talk about something new this year. It's not responsive design part 7. I feel like I've made my point on that. You should do responsive design. You'll win. It's pretty obvious at this point. I help companies use design as a tool to solve their business challenges. But design is a pretty loose term these days, so when I say it, I kind of mean all of these things at once. Not bigger logos. I don't do that for people. Good design comes from questioning things and thinking. So good designers try to frame problems from multiple perspectives, and a lot of times that means putting the business and the customer on equal footing. I spent the first 4 years of my career focused on B2C companies, helping them grow into a world with many devices using responsive design. And almost 3 years ago, I started consulting with a company called Watsco, which is the largest distributor of HVAC and refrigeration products in the world. They're a B2B business through and through, and they operate via a handful of subsidiary companies. So I'm the design and front-end lead for 2 of their businesses. One's called Gemaire, and they won the B2B UX award last year. And the other one is called Carrier Enterprise, which is their largest company. And in the last 12 months, we launched 12 B2B sites that are operated independently by region, and they all have one unified shared code base. So I really love to keep talking about responsive design, but today I'm here to share some things that I've learned designing for B2B the last few years. Things like how customer expectations are fundamentally different, but still influenced by the B2C world, and some of the tactics that you can use to make a difference in the lives of both B2B sellers and buyers. So let's start with a pretty broad look at some B2C e-commerce trends, and then use that to frame where B2B sits today. Last year, the U.S. retail e-commerce market sales totaled about $342 billion. 2015 was the 6th year of consecutive growth that was over 15%. And e-commerce represented about 7.3% of all U.S. retail sales, which is still a pretty small piece of the pie. But e-commerce was responsible for about 66% of the total retail sales growth. So if you think about that for a second, only 7% of the sales drove more than the majority of the growth in the retail space. And the B2B market is growing too. Right now, about 30% of Magento enterprise sites are B2B sites. B2C tends to get more of the love, but in real dollars, it's completely dwarfed by B2B. It's about double the size of B2C commerce, but it's growing at a little bit of a slower rate. One ahead. So about $780 billion, and 7.7% growth until 2020, when it's expected to be $1.13 trillion. And globally, B2B online sales will be $6.7 trillion in the same time period. So Forrester did a prediction that B2B growth is mostly going to be driven by channel shifting buyers away from offline and phone sales, which is going to create a lot of opportunity to reduce costs. The top B2B categories today are petroleum and pharmaceutical products, but the fastest growing tends to be durable goods like motor vehicles, electronics, and industrial machinery. Oracle did a white paper last year that divided some of the challenges that B2B sellers face into 3 categories. Basically, it's revenue growth, complexity management, and customer experience management. And those are basically the exact same challenges that B2C companies face. But the real elephant in the room for B2B companies is that they have more complexity and they tend to move slower. And that's because the B2B relationship is fundamentally different from the way that consumers buy. So B2B has kind of continued transacting with less sophistication and pretty, by comparison, ancient technology in a lot of cases. But the rapid growth and escalation of B2C commerce and the proliferation of mobile devices in the last 5 years has put tremendous pressure on B2B companies to change and catch up because their experiences just aren't comparable these days. B2B buyers are people, though, and their expectations are always going to be rooted in their personal shopping experiences. So if you look at a lot of B2B companies, they still have no e-commerce functionality at all. They're just dipping into this pool. And less than a third of the companies that have invested in e-commerce are supporting multiple devices today. So they're still very behind the times. About 18% of them are using native mobile apps. About 26% of them are using responsive sites. And the reality is that a lot of B2B businesses are either falling further behind or they're hurtling pretty far ahead, trying to leapfrog things that they missed in the last few years. Because the technology that's going to enable them to grow is going to be their primary business driver in the future. So the customer is really the one that's forcing them to act now. And a lot like the sort of downward spiral that you see in retail commerce, more than half of B2B buyers would prefer to be purchasing online than through a sales rep. And today, 74% of B2B buyers research more than half of their work-related purchases online. So they're already stepping pretty heavily in this direction. But right now, only 30% of those people can actually complete a purchase. So less than half of them that are doing their research online can actually do it. They still have to pick up the phone and call their rep. And that's a huge disconnect between the way that B2B buyers want to be shopping today and what B2B sellers are offering. So simply replicating your B2B sales process online isn't going to be successful because you need to bridge that gap between the expectations of B2C shopping and the way that B2B buyers actually behave. Consumers do this thing called shopping, and it's a process that starts and restarts every time you go to make a new purchase. They're very conscious of the store experience. They can be informed or delighted or engaged, or they could do none of those things. Consumers, in the past, they used to comparison shop ruthlessly in the early days of e-commerce. But you've probably noticed in the last couple of years that prices tend to be pretty consistent everywhere these days. And a lot of people go straight to Amazon because the price is going to be just about the same as everywhere else. Yeah? It's okay. You can admit that one. Amazon has your loyalty in a lot of cases because they designed this service called Amazon Prime. And it promises that you'll get 2-day shipping on 20 million items. So you can almost guarantee that Amazon's going to be the best at delivering a commodity good if it's a product that thousands of retailers sell. But businesses are run by people, and they care about the same things consumers do. Difference is how they buy. They have this special word for it called procurement. They don't like to shop because shopping is time taking away a resource that a business has to pay for. When businesses buy, a lot of times they know exactly what they need. They're not looking around, they're not researching, they've bought it many times before. And what they want to do is choose a supplier and make that relationship work because it's expensive to rethink a change. Consumers actually behave the same way. That's why Amazon's so convenient and you keep buying from them. But it also kind of explains why you have niche stores. So I buy all my motorcycle gear from a company called Revzilla because of their co-founder. His name's Anthony. He's made hundreds of these 5 to 10 minute videos that detail every product in the store. I've watched probably 10 hours of this guy talking. So he's earned a lot of trust for their brand because the reviews that he does are detailed, they're not sugar-coated, he'll say if a product is bad, and and they're ubiquitous. Every item is reviewed with similar quality. And what's really valuable about this is Anthony gives you this insight from watching the same products develop year over year. So you can really trust that he is someone who understands the industry and understands where it's going and where it's been. And just by watching a few videos, you can pick that up. So I buy from RevZilla because the service they offer me is the voice of a reliable expert. They make me a safer and a smarter rider than if I had bought the same product from Amazon. A company like RevZilla can win customers because they design this service, and it's a lot more valuable than just presenting their products to me. So in the past, B2B sellers may have negotiated exclusive deals or distribution rights, but the technology changes have really enabled manufacturers to grow and diversify their partnerships. So now many manufacturers are investing again in online distribution and direct sales channels. And that really shifts the landscape for distributors who once relied on that strong and support group as a competitive advantage. B2B sellers need to adapt by designing services that become critical to their customers' success. They need to do more than just stock and fulfill orders these days to build value for a B2B buyer. And investing in services that do that will pay off both online and offline. So good design is always a multiplier for a strong business, but designing services for B2B buyers is very different than designing for consumer conversion. A consumer has to be sold on a single product to convert, and a business really has to be sold on the long-term relationship of a B2B seller. B2B sellers depend on developing that relationship for repetitive purchasing because a lot of times their margins are much lower than B2C. So a buyer who just dips into the system and they never purchase again can actually cost the business more money because of the onboarding costs of bringing them into the fold. But if they're happy, B2B buyers can become a stable revenue stream, unlike anything that's in the B2C world. The best way to do that is by designing the user experience around services that are really indispensable to them being successful. So I'm going to go through about 9 areas that you can that can help set B2B sellers apart, and it also ensure that your customers stay hooked on you. I see a couple phones. I'll give you 1 sec. Okay. Yeah. So B2B sites are much more likely than B2C sites to be walled gardens. It's actually pretty hard to go out and benchmark them. You kind of have to lie a little bit to get access. So most of my examples are going to come from client projects that I can share without getting into too much trouble. But it's common for things like pricing and availability, and sometimes even the whole catalog to be blocked by guest users. 44% of B2B buyers say the onboarding is too complex for them. Customer acquisition is really challenging for B2B companies for 2 reasons. One, you need to convince a potential buyer to register with some invisible propositions of value. If they can't see your catalog or your prices, you need to find some other way to tell them, hey, this is worth your time to go through our vetting process. And 2, when you get in there, the actual registration can be complex. Many B2B sellers won't even allow customers to register won't even allow consumers to register because they want to buy below a minimum quantity they want to sell. They may be restricted by a partner agreement, or products require a specific license or authority to buy. So some other B2C sites will allow consumers to shop, but they'll give them a segregated catalog. The terms and prices that are advertised for them might be totally different, and they can only be accessed by consumers. Your business buyers won't be happy if you start selling direct to consumers, and then the consumers try to bypass them to get around a pricing markup that they kind of depend on. So all these challenges really raise the barrier to entry for B2B buyers, and it adds complexity to the onboarding process. For new customers, registering may require vetting of business information or trade licenses. So it's best when you're doing this to really clearly state all the information that a potential user needs to register before they get started. Because if they don't have something and then they have to go find it and come back the next day, they're just that much less likely to complete it, and they'll end up going somewhere else. Another thing to be wary of is your sales team may take several days or even more to activate a new account. The expectation for online sites is, again, it's rooted in B2C commerce. So I register, I expect to be in there instantly. And if you leave a user in pending status, that just gives them an opportunity to write you off. So if possible, what you should try to do is grant that user access immediately so they can explore the potential of the system. Maybe you disable some critical functionality like ordering or checkout, but it's better to get those new users engaged immediately after registration rather than forcing them to wait for a sales rep to call and kind of feel them out and activate their account. And it's very possible that your offline business processes are going to have to change to support the expectations that people have online. Ideally, you should try to automate that contract creation so new customers get activated immediately with a standardized set of terms, and you won't have to do any manual intervention. That means that a customer can begin buying before a salesperson needs to review their account, and when they do reach out, they can be a lot more helpful because they've already had some time to become familiar with the system. Existing customers often need a lot more care than you expect to onboard them properly. It's a mistake to assume that they're all really eager to jump into your new digital services, even if it's going to benefit their business. Many are going to be very busy, and they'll be fine with your current process. For GemAir and CE, we built a separate registration path so existing customers could link their offline accounts together to their online profile. And in theory, this should have been easy because we validate their registration data directly against the ERP system. But we kind of learned that it's better to validate this very loosely when accepting a registration because we're going to have a sales rep reach out to them anyway. And in practice, we found that even when a customer copies directly from an invoice, sometimes they were unable to link accounts. And it's really frustrating if something like capitalization or a changed phone number prevents you from getting into the system when you're already a customer. Some of our best customers were actually frustrated in their first interaction with the new sites, and that made it really hard to win them back because we kind of wasted their time. But thankfully, as we rolled this out to groups of customers in stages, we could change the way that we approached it. So what I would recommend now is you should pre-register all your existing customers. Don't ask them to go out and make an account. Just do it for them, get them enrolled in the system, and then have a sales rep reach out to them. Schedule a time where you can introduce the website, sell them on the benefits, and walk them the whole way through doing their first order before you leave that meeting. Because if you just leave it up to them to do it of their own volition, a lot of them are not going to complete it. So rolling out an e-commerce system to customers is difficult, but consider that you also need to onboard your own employees. Crescent Electric Supply learned this the hard way because they basically stalled the growth of their new e-commerce platform. Sorry, a little bit behind. People will naturally resist an e-commerce channel that they don't understand or something that feels like a competitor to them or it threatens their job security. So you probably remember there's an episode of The Office where Dwight Schrute challenges the company's e-commerce site to sell more paper than him in a single day. In that show, he's really just terrified of losing his commissions and possibly even his job. The key to getting employees onboarded early is education. Don't blindside them when you launch the e-commerce site to customers. Sending progress reports as the platform is under development, it gives them more time to raise concerns, and you can actually help improve the end result because they're the ones who interface directly with your customers. And they really need those opportunities to invest themselves in the system, and then they can feel a responsibility toward making it work and be successful for the company. Recording those training sessions and documentation can save time in the long run because those resources are easy to distribute to new hires or serve as a refresher. But because producing that content that is useful can take a lot of time and effort, you really need to plan ahead to make sure that the people with the right domain expertise and knowledge are around and available to help create it. If your e-commerce team is being set up as a siloed division, that's only going to alienate your traditional sales team. The organizations that are driving a lot of growth from e-commerce are really comfortable seeing that channel shift. They're not shying away from it or scared of it because online revenue is inevitably going to push up to become 10, 20, 30, 40% of your total sales. It'll go higher, and your attribution model is going to need to adapt because there's going to be a fundamental change. There are many ways to slice it, but if you look at online sales from an account that's owned by a salesman, you can't just cut them out of that loop. And new accounts that get created, they're going to want a piece of it, or it's going to feel unfair to them. So any organic digital growth, you need to find a way to divide up and give each customer a point of contact within the company. And that means CMOD because the salesman didn't really generate that lead, but their role is probably going to have to adapt in the future. Customers, in a lot of times, won't need a sales call to get quotes. They won't use it to place orders. So rather than fearing becoming obsolete, when you revive your sales team, you want them to spend more time growing your customer base because they're being served more efficiently. And with that additional time, sales can be a lot more proactive about addressing the needs of all of your customers. And a big thing is giving salespeople visibility and power to interact with those customers directly via the online channels. That's really vital to helping them both establish and maintain their relationship as you undergo that channel shift. Not all customers are going to want to do that, but if your salespeople aren't involved at all, you're really setting them up to fail within the organization's future. Data is a huge advantage for e-commerce companies, and before you can support any incoming business across multiple channels, you need the ERP integrations to connect those lines of business. Because customers really see no distinction in your company between your offline or online business. They don't care if it's desktop or mobile. The services of your company really need to be consistent, and an omni-channel customer needs to be able to transact fluidly across all of those channels. Product information management is a new challenge for a lot of distributors who are moving beyond a single channel. B2B companies that make major investments in defining and implementing a PIM system can access data quality or can assess data quality faster, and they can launch new products more easily. We were very fortunate with Watsco that they established a team in advance of the project starting that's done a really phenomenal job stewarding a PIM system that can serve all of the business units simultaneously. And it's especially important when vendors supply product info because their data quality standards are not going to meet up with everything you've done in the past. They'll be all over the place. So you need a process to intake it, evaluate it, and normalize that before it can be published onto the site. And that can really make or break you if you have vendors who are supplying thousands or tens of thousands of products. This isn't really a PIM talk, but these are some excellent options for PIM systems in Magento. So last year I spoke about designing along the conversion path, and in this section I want to talk about wayfinding, because last year I focused more on hierarchical navigation and taxonomy design. This kind of determines how users find their way to a product, but it also subliminally teaches them about the breadth of your catalog, what you actually sell, even if it's not the thing that they're looking for. Wayfinding is still important for B2B buyers, but they don't need the same acclimation to your company as B2C customers do, because the day-to-day value of that navigation is going to become lower and lower to them the longer that they use your site. Search is a much more effective starting point when the taxonomy is too broad to explore and navigate. So the behavior of B2B buyers is going to be different here because they're not shopping, and a lot of times they know the exact product they're looking for before they reach your site. It's really not efficient for them to drill down by category or filtering out attributes to find one specific copper fitting among hundreds of them. So if you look at sites like Amazon or Alibaba, they basically break the department store mold. If there's any kind of widget or thing, they probably sell it, and that makes them really inefficient to navigate hierarchically. Their taxonomies are just too unwieldy to visualize, even if you have a big screen, and it's hard to model them conceptually too, because many products fit into different categories at the same time. So the baseline search experience is always going to be very simple. It's just going to be a text input and a search button. You can use UI tools like Type Ahead, some people call it auto-suggest or autocomplete, to augment whatever the user's query is as they're typing it and show some relevant info in advance. If you can save them a click by matching a product name or a brand or a SKU automatically, that's a really good thing. And you'd be surprised, a lot of B2B buyers actually know SKUs that they buy every day by heart. They just key them in, they don't even look, they just know it. And that's the fastest way for them to find items. Some search enhancements that you'll see across sites are really far from standardized, though, if you start to pay attention to it. The Bainbridge Institute did a really nice study documenting some of these. Differences in UX variation, like query highlighting, search scopes, different result types that you can present. Stores that have separate desktop, mobile sites, and mobile apps, they tend to behave really inconsistently. Because a lot of e-commerce companies, to be honest, they tend to buy their technology rather than building it. And this can lead to a pretty disconnected user experience. Home Depot is a great example of this. They have multiple digital stores, and search behaves differently on every single one of them. So on their desktop site, they show search scopes, suggested queries, products, categories, brands. It's really robust and has a lot of features in it. But if you switch over to their mobile site, they only show you suggested queries and categories and brands. You can't find a product in their search. And if you go to the iPhone app, they only show you suggested queries. So if a contractor's out there researching a quote on his laptop, and then later he uses his phone to check inventory at the store that he's near, he's going to be pretty disappointed. And in Home Depot's case, you can't even find products directly via any of their mobile solutions for either small screen technology. And it's doubly worse because users that took that extra step to download the app, they're actually getting the most inferior experience. So relying on vendors that build all your search implementations for different platforms, you have to make sure that you can actually build it to be consistent across all the places where users are going to interact with your site. And that's not just the suggestions, but also the relevance of the rankings. If they implement their own indexes or algorithms, they're probably going to behave differently. And the last thing that you want to do as a marketing organization is have a second redundant platform that you have to tune and tweak to behave the same way. So one great about thing is with responsive design is that it's accessible and accessibility and familiarity are maximized. Because all that search behavior and traversal and content are universal across all the platforms. So this is a B2B company called Webstaurant Store. They sell restaurant supplies, and in their responsive site, they show keywords, categories, products, and vendors across all devices. We built sort of the same thing, same flexibility into CE and GemAir. Their responsive search powers all different devices, and it also powers our native apps. So we have Android and Apple apps, and we use an embedded web view to inject the Magento e-commerce store inside the app. Personalization is the thing that nobody can shut up about right now. Just kidding. It's a really broad term, but if you have the fundamentals of e-commerce, that's basically enabling selling to anyone, this nondescript customer. And personalization builds on top of that with sophistication to really consider the customer as part of that selling equation. That can have a lot of different outcomes, but most personalization falls into these three broader camps. For business, in a lot of cases, the most desired personalization approach is algorithmic merchandising. You just let shoppers do their thing on their site, and software learns from their behavior, collects some data about it, and then eventually it starts suggesting new products to them, related products, and it's going to capture the shift that people are continually doing as they move throughout your site and buy different items. Amazon's kind of the king of this. You'll see merchandising on every single page load based on where you've been 2 pages ago, 5 pages ago. They just load it up with a platter of suggestions. Crowdsourced buying is a way to shield the maker of products from the inefficiencies of finding a good product market fit. Cotton Bureau is a B2B manufacturer that kind of masquerades as a B2C site. They harness the wisdom of crowds for their entire business model. So basically, an independent shirt designer can pre-sell their ideas on Cotton Bureau without contracting any production or distribution for a product that's not proven. And then based on those pre-sales, Cotton Bureau will manufacture, distribute, and pay royalties to those designers. This is a personalization model that really lowers the upfront costs to bring products to market, and it reduces the distributor's risks buying inventory or producing it that may never sell. The last big one is on-demand production. These are like customized goods. It's the most expensive because the technology to implement it needs to be more state-of-the-art to operate efficiently. But for premium products, that type of customization can be a real differentiator. So in the Road to Imagine trip that we did, riding along the northern arc, I wanted to add a windproof mid-layer because we were going to be heading into snowy territory. So I went right out to harleydavidson.com. Just kidding, don't buy anything there. I really wanted to get the lightest and warmest gear possible. So I thought about places that are really windy, and that tends to be places that climbers go. And decades ago, Eddie Bauer used to make this jacket called the B9 Parka. It's what World War II fighter pilots flew in when planes didn't have heat. And they patented the quilted down jacket that the first American used to summit Mount Everest. Since then, in the 70s, the brand kind of lost its roots. They got more into the boring, casual outdoor clothing market. But in 2011, they kind of turned it back around, and they started making expedition-grade gear again with this line called First Descent. This is actually the same guy, first one to climb Everest, US citizen. And the gear holds up to competitors from Patagonia or Mountain Hardwear, but it doesn't really stand out in the category. It's very crowded at this point. There are a lot of manufacturers. So in October, they launched this tool called Eddie Bauer Custom, and it's really easy to fall in love with it. 2 of their First Descent products are now fully customizable, and they're made to order. It takes about a month for it to get to you, so it is labor intensive. But if you want to pay a premium for it, you can design a storm down jacket that, for me, it matches my Ducati back at home, and it'll help me stay warm even if I'm soaking wet, and it'll still look good if I wear it without a jacket over top of it. So all those are personalization tactics that you'll see in B2B and B2C sites, and they're mostly applicable. But when you start to extend to things like pricing and fulfillment personalization, that's really where you're talking about selling to businesses. You can drive huge value for B2B buyers and for your company by transitioning the quoting process out of your sales team to a self-service tool online. So if you can deliver those real-time quotes and pricing and inventory that's actionable for a buyer, that's a real game changer because your doors stay open 100% of the time. They don't have to wait till 8 a.m. when your sales guys get into the building. 50% of B2B buyers say that personalization's a key reason that they choose a supplier. But it requires bringing all of that complex business logic and, most importantly, the relationships they have with that sales team into the online arena. And different customers within your company, they can have very different pricing terms, exceptions, and rules that only apply to them. Same thing for fulfillment. There's going to be a lot of complex logic that's specific to each customer and the things that they do in their business. In most cases, a B2B supplier has to manage all those legacy commitments to buyers while planning for future expansion, and all the marketing plans that are more suited to e-commerce than offline sales. So from a customer perspective, it's really going to become your responsibility to deliver those same terms and services that they receive offline, even accommodating for all those special exceptions that their sales rep promised them a couple months ago. And on top of this, you need to streamline all that complexity. So it actually has to be easier for them than picking up the phone and saying, hey, John, place this order for me. When you lose out on that personal touch, you need to guarantee to them that your digital services are going to be an order of magnitude faster for them and also more accurate. So if you mess up getting all that complexity into your product, they're just going to say, hey, I can't do exactly what I need to. I'm just going to call my sales rep back. And from a technology standpoint, that's really challenging. So pricing on a B2C site is typically universal. Maybe it's different at a national or a global level. But the fulfillment is usually centralized or distributed through an automatic system. And for a consumer, really the only concern is this product in stock or out of stock? Can I get it right now? That makes it really simple to deliver the same view to every customer who hits your site. But when the pricing you offer and the fulfillment terms you offer are really dependent on the customer and the circumstances of the purchase order they're trying to complete at this moment, all those variables need to be calculated in real time. And it's probably a given that you're going to have to work around performance constraints to do this. A lot of ERP systems are not designed for getting that info out quickly. So for example, in CE and GemAir, we made pricing and inventory calls asynchronous to speed up the experience of using the site. We want the page to render more quickly than we can actually get that real-time data back. But as soon as it's available, we inject it into the site so you can see it. One of the things that really sets B2B buyers apart is both the volume and frequency of the orders that they'll place once they've chosen a supplier. So unlike a B2C experience, they don't need to be presented the product or sold on its benefits or convinced that your store is going to take the best care of them. Once they become a customer, they really just want to get in there and buy. So adding individual items to their cart is not going to be enough when this buyer is placing dozens of orders a day. It's just going to slow them down for every new job they have to add. So one of the key things you can do for B2B buyers to improve their experience is design more efficient ways for them to order and create carts. To start in your order history, you can enable direct rebuying of any previous order. A lot of times a customer will go in and have a restocking order they do every so often. It's also really useful to have a separate button that copies the contents of an order into their cart so they can make some modifications if they need to bump up inventory or take an item out. A lot of buyers will use this as a starting point for creating a new order, and then they'll customize before they go to checkout. Related to rebuying for restocking, it's also really useful to be able to convert an order to a subscription so they can have that item on a set schedule. For example, materials that are used in production that are needed week after week after week, automating that ordering with an online management tool really saves that B2B buyer time, and it makes the demand for the product a lot more predictable. Creating a new order is sort of a different challenge. For sites with thousands of products, if a buyer needs to add 5+ clicks to narrow down to an item before they can add it to cart, that's going to consume a lot of their day. Quick order is an approach where you can help buyers quickly fill their cart with a list of needed items. A buyer starts by searching for the item number or the product name. And unlike a traditional search, the user doesn't actually visit the product page. Every selection sort of goes into this thing called a quick list. And what it's meant to do is help a buyer easily assemble a large number of items quickly, say in under a minute, and then add them all to their cart at once and begin checkout. The quick list is personalized as well, so it's always going to show the pricing and fulfillment terms that they have set up as they're browsing around the site. And for GemAir, we took this one step further, and we built some tools to support copy-pasting huge lists, say something they bring out of Excel, directly into the quick order tool. So it's extended, and they can use both sides of it simultaneously. For many businesses, though, buying isn't a continual string of independent orders, so it can be a hassle finding an old order that they want to recreate or rebuilding a cart from scratch, even if you have these good, useful tools. So you can repurpose the wish list feature that you see in a lot of B2C sites and supercharge it for B2B. Magento Enterprise supports multiple wish lists out of the box, so you can create essentially unique collections for different activities. Some buyers are going to use this for restocking orders. They'll make a list for each one. Some buyers will use it to create job templates to standardize parts or equipment that they need for routine operations. Or maybe they're creating custom quotes for multiple jobs as they're being spec'd. And if they tried to put everything into the cart, they would get all mixed up. But with lists, they can tally them up separately and independently to stay organized. Things get even better when you start to combine some of the power features with personalization. So we actually built the quick order feature as an extensible interface. All it really does is help a buyer select products quickly and put them in a temporary collection. So we integrated the quick add into the wish list. So if they're looking at a list, they don't have to navigate out to a product page and add all those items one at a time. They can quickly move them all into their quick list at once, or into their wish list at once. So generating large numbers of detailed lists is just as slow as navigating the site to find products. So if you're out in the site and you see an item that you want to add to a specific list, you want to be able to have them specify exactly where it goes at the time that they want to add it. And of course, lists can be added directly to the cart, but a few additional modifications can help them a lot because some buyers will treat lists differently. They may want to save specific quantities of items within that list so they can truly automate rebuying in mass. They don't want to have to modify the quantities once they get them into their cart. Sometimes buyers will create lists that contain substitute products or additional add-ons that they may not purchase every time that they buy from that list, or they never intend to buy from the whole list. So they kind of treat it like their own personal custom order builder. And that's really powerful for them if they can go through and check off boxes of certain products that they want to add to cart and ignore other ones. But as you start to build all this tech into the lists feature and they get more sophisticated and used more heavily, buyers are going to need additional tools to manage them. So you want them to be able to name lists, possibly add notes to them. We built functionality to enable splitting lists or merging lists if they need to consolidate them. Of course, you can delete them. And you may want to build additional tools to help take a subset of one list and break it out into a new list if they want to fork it and start somewhere else. There's pretty much an endless amount of customization that you can do to help improve their experience here. And the best thing is to really listen to buyer feedback, because as they start using your site, you'll have no shortage of complaints and suggestions of things you can do better. Sometimes buyers don't even know the exact item that they're looking for, but they know a piece of related info. For example, repairman might need to know order replacement parts for a piece of equipment, but he only knows the equipment's item number. So product finders are a really good solution for that. You can start with information you know, like a brand or item number, and then list out all the components that are matched to that item. It's a lot quicker than going out and finding a PDF of the parts diagram and trying to match things up. And it also functions really well as a cross-selling tool. So if you need to replace a part that has an expensive first-party replacement, you can find items from third parties that are going to match or fit, or maybe even have a good warranty that you can recommend as an alternative. It's also a good way to find products that are out of production or superseded by newer items, which you wouldn't be able to do quickly just by searching for the product. It's a great example of where PIM systems are really necessary as you build more complexity into the site, because all those complex relationships between products across different vendors aren't going to come for free. You need to make sure that the raw data you're building in there can be taken advantage of, and to do that you have to connect it all. Another way to merchandise with personalization is by extracting a buyer's product history and making it useful. For GemAir, we built a feature called My Products that presents a categorical breakdown of the most recent and frequently bought products by that user. So a buyer can quickly assemble a quick list on this page and then add it to the cart, or they can export their data to analyze it offline, or take it to make lists out of. For CE, we built a product history search that renders a purchase history graph for any product in the site, and it'll pull down any order that contains that item that they've purchased before. This can be really useful for buyers when they're trying to find an obscure part that they purchased with another order or with another product. And these features are really uncommon in B2C commerce because it really reminds consumers how much money they're spending, and that can impede future sales. But for businesses, it can really help them to make smarter buying decisions and save time in the future if buying can be automated. And again, customers don't care about the channels. Online and offline are the same thing. Apps and websites are the same thing to them. Your support team really needs the training and authority to resolve issues regardless of channel. So Home Depot, for example, they sold $4.7 billion online last year. Online was only about 5.3% of their revenue, but they noticed a really interesting problem. About 40% of their online orders ended up in the store in some way, shape, or form. Based on the sales data you collect, it might not seem critical to develop programs that really unify your offline and online operations, but your customers aren't going to see those lines. So you really need to think through the services you offer holistically so that they can do business on their terms. And I keep referring to the B2B buyer as a generic term, but it's important to remember this persona takes a lot of different shapes and forms. Everyone's going to have unique requirements that need to be served in original ways. 56% of B2B executives say they have customers that can only be served online. And the demographic trends we're seeing in the population are continually suggesting that e-commerce is going to gain on retail sales, and it's going to become more important in the future. So when you think about that, look ahead to who's going to be joining the workforce in 5 to 10 years and how they're going to fit into your organization. Millennials are the first generation globally where internet use is going to be a universal trait for them. Pew Research did a survey where 18 to 24-year-olds were the most likely to use internet and smartphones, and in emerging economies, that trend was significantly more exaggerated. So if you're looking for global expansion too, you need to be able to meet these people on the level they're going to be playing at. Just to illustrate it, adults, 72% of smartphones, 92% with millennials, 75% are making purchases from their phones, and 36% of that young group report being online almost constantly. Right now, the average age of a B2B buyer is under 35. So if you're looking at this from maybe senior management, they're not going to fall into this category, but the people who are using these tools are going to be very fluent and familiar with them. And that's important because right now 30% of the US labor force is millennials, and that's a bigger group than baby boomers, it's bigger than Generation X. And as the working population shifts toward groups that are more and more comfortable with technology, it's going to become harder and harder for businesses to do business without it. And even today, almost 3/4 of B2B buyers prefer researching online and talking to a sales rep. So you really need to be prepared for that cultural shift that's coming within B2B, because workers in the future will consider digital services a vital part of the B2B relationships and who they choose to buy from. So let's wrap it up now. I hope I gave you some interesting things to consider when designing the B2B experience and some ideas to help improve your business. This approach has been successful for me and with my B2B clients that transitioned from having no e-commerce or very limited archaic systems, and now they're offering robust services. They add significant value to the business and to their customers' success. So thank you and good luck.